Okay,
All right.
sitting here looking at my daughter. Uh, when I was growing up, I had a lot of female problems. So I was told probably I never would have any children. So we were married well over a year, and then I did when Jerry was transferred to Savannah, Georgia. We lived there several months, and on our way home, I was uh, when he got discharged. I was very, very sick, but I thought it was because I had a abscessed tooth. But then I found out later I was pregnant, so we were very, very surprised. But we named somehow or another. We just figured we'd have a daughter, and we had our Debbie was named our little Debbie. We referred to our before she was even born. We referred to our little Debbie. So we did have a girl. So then I guess after that, then we kind of wanted a boy. And then after that, Debbie kind of wanted a sister, which she never had. So she's got three brothers. So, how do you feel about that?
Well, it paid off. I had my room to myself, and the three boys had to share one.
That's right. They had three boys in the same room, and they had the desk set up where they did their homework and all, and they all had to share the same desk and everything. So, but she could had her closet and everything to herself. Uh, Debbie was kind of as she was getting a little older, though she was kind of the little mama too. She would, especially when her last brother was born. She was you were 9 when how old were you, Debbie, when Barry was born? She was 9, so she used to feed him and all that kind of stuff. She so till this day they are very close because they were she mom babied him so much when he was a baby, and or anytime he wanted he didn't like what I said to him, he'd run to Debbie. And Debbie would sit and talk to him and or play with him or whatever. So they still talk a lot. They still talk a lot to each other on the phone and whatnot.
Well, I'm close to all three of them, just in different ways.
That's one thing I'm very, very proud of, that all of these kids have stayed close to each other. I'm not to say that they don't get aggravated with each other sometimes, but they have never stopped talking to each other or gotten so angry that they wouldn't talk to each other. They'd work it out if they had something that they didn't like that one said or did. And that's I've always been very, because there's some families that the kids end up they when they get married and get older they don't talk to each other anymore. But they've all stayed close. They come. We all get together often. So that's one thing I'm very proud of my kids for that.
One of the things I've always remembered and appreciated was that you would sit and help us with our English compositions. I don't remember if the older kids helped the younger kids as time went on, but I know you at the beginning you helped me with all that, and I think that was part of what led me to be more. I was very good at English and spelling and the written arts and all that, and I think that was a good way to start. And I can remember years after we were married, you you gave me my report cards. You every so often you give us things that were ours, but from way back. And I looked at my report card from first grade and second grade, and I had like C's, which was strange to me because I made A's, mostly A's and few B's all the way up through high school, and I thought that was kind of strange having C's in first grade. But what I figured out, I guess eventually, was that because you would help us with our schoolwork down the road, that eventually, we got to be more, catch on better, and we'd make better grades.
Sometimes I think it was the teachers too. Some of the teachers were, it looks like they were harder. They expected more of the kids. They were trying to make them do better, and I think sometimes the grades had something to do with that too. Because I know me too. I'd be surprised sometimes because y'all all seemed so bright and all that. I mean, they didn't seem to have that hard of time in school.
But I think being the oldest, it's not like I was around, and being the oldest and we didn't have any older cousins. I was the first one to go to school, and I didn't know what school was like. So I kind of was on the front end of all of that. And it probably, I guess it just took me a while to figure out what I had to do to make better grades.
Well, I know when I was growing up and going to school, Mama never helped at all because Mom had gone to about the third grade or something, and she could read and write, but she wasn't, really bright and didn't help with any homework or anything like that. We just kind of had to get it on our own. But my best the subject that I liked the most was in all the way through high school and all was always English, and I never was too good in arithmetic. So when it came to y'all with arithmetic, I wasn't great with that. But it was the English. I kind of enjoyed that, and I guess.
Well, and looking at my the work I do now, the type of work I do in accounting, I have to be very scheduled, very organized, very accurate, and it's like a continuous adjustment of my schedule. Like I have to learn how to jump from one thing to the other, and looking back on when we were growing up, you and Daddy always had us lined out to do something. There was always work to do around here, work in the garden, work around the house. And if I was cleaning the living room, I had to make sure I went from left to right and not right to left. So there were certain ways to do things. And I think all that, at the time, like the garden work and everything was necessary to get all of the food prepared and everything for the good of the family, but that underlying work ethic was being taught all the time. And that's one thing that I noticed a big difference in when I had my children. We lived in a subdivision, and yeah, you have household chores and everything, but it wasn't like here. I always say we grew up on a farm to where there was always something that had to be done, and it had to be done at a certain time in a certain way. And even if you didn't like that little guy next to you that you have a fight with 5 minutes before, I don't care if you don't like him. Both of y'all are gonna get out there and dig those potatoes or pick the peas or gather the tomatoes in the bucket or whatever. And I remember too, we'd sit and shell peas at night. We'd shoot each other with peas while we were watching TV and wonder why we had peas under the seat cushions. But I look back on those days and realized a lot of that, y'all may not have been intentional teaching us, but because it needed to be done, but that's where I learned a lot of my work ethic. And it's served me well in all the years, that not only in my work, but in my personal life, where I had to learn how to balance work and home and getting everything done. I had 24 hours just like everybody else, but I had so much to get done.
I remember too, though, in school, you never did. You didn't want to take anything like bookkeeping and typing and things. When I was growing up, typing was very important. And boy, you didn't want to learn how to type at all. You said you didn't care if you never learned to type. And nowadays, though, with the computers and everything, that's what it is, really, is typing. And so you really had to more or less teach yourself, I think.
Well, I sat here with Mavis Beacon on a Mavis Beacon tape learning how to type because I had been stubborn about
Taking it in
not
school.
learning it in high school, and I even took a couple of typing classes in college. I mean, you don't always know what's coming down the pike, and I never thought I'd end up in accounting because I always said I would never end up in a business career, and I probably could have gone into some other field, but I didn't really care for healthcare.
You talked about being a teacher at one time.
Yeah, and I probably would have been a good teacher, but by the time I was through with school, I'd had so much. I decided, no, I don't want to teach 30 of some other people's kids. It's funny, Rocky ended up being a teacher, but he kind of ended up in that by default. But I've been happy with my accounting career, though. I've learned a lot.
Well, when you really started working out of college, though, you went into the banking thing as a personal secretary, really. And though you realized, though, with all the others there, the women and all, they kind of catty with each other.
Well, that's the nature of that kind of
Yeah, they were
environment.
always, one was afraid another one would get ahead of before they did or something or another, so that
Well, when we got married and I moved to Homa and I went to job interviews, I actually had a choice between a banking job and going to work for Energy Tools, where I finally did go to work. And I was explaining this to Michael one night as an example of sometimes you make choices and it's not necessarily based on a logical thing like here's the pros and here's the cons and this is the logical thing to do. Sometimes it's a gut reaction to how you feel. And I remember making that choice where I thought, I saw banking as one side of the fence and business as the other side of the fence. It's not exactly an adversarial relationship, but it can be because the companies come to the bank for a loan. The loan puts them through a vetting process, and they may or may not offer them the loan if the company's not strong enough. So it's kind of a two sides of the fence thing. So I decided I wanted to try the other side of the fence. That's why I chose not to go with banking. And that was probably a good choice because not too long after that, the oil industry went down and I was working for an oil field company, but they treated us more like family, and the banking industry started laying people off. But another thing that that I've always been grateful for is the commitment to family that you taught all of us. It was more than just something you did. It was the commitment was something you lived every day, and you made it clear that everybody, we all needed to love each other. You tell us, well, I don't care if you don't like your brother right now, you got to love him.
Yeah, that was said so often. But I don't know. Dad and I always tried. We didn't want to show any favoritism to any of you. We wanted for y'all all to feel that y'all were loved the same. We really didn't try to, didn't want to have any favorites. We loved all four of you. And we wanted y'all all to know that. We didn't want to feel like, well, you like him better than you like me or whatever. We tried so hard not to let that enter in at all. That's one thing we really.
And I think y'all succeeded, although I found at times it was a little comical because we're all different people and we've all had different situations in our lives, and sometimes one needed something and the rest of us didn't need that. But I understand that there was a commitment there to not to like say love each one of us equally. And we all have challenges in our own families these days, but I think that's just that's the nature of how things go, how life is, and the culture we're living in. And y'all probably won't see the resolution of some of those issues, but I know, Rocky and I have been together, like, we've been married 34 years, and there have been ways that your and Daddy's influence on me has changed how we relate to each other. Where, in the beginning years, sometimes it was rough. I mean, you get two people who are so different and you manage to stay together that long and still really love each other. I mean, there's a lot to be said for learning that day by day here, because this was, none of us were people that were real quiet or.
No, and I'm one too that believes that it's not wrong for a husband and wife to squabble with each other. Because I was one that if he said or did something I didn't like, I let him know. I didn't keep my mouth shut. But it would be said and then it would be forgotten. I mean, it's not something that I would harbor or wouldn't speak to your dad for a week or something like that. I mean, it was said and then that was it, and then we'd go on, as before. Because, but I was one that I never thought that a wife should really just keep her mouth shut no matter what. So, 'cause I couldn't keep my mouth shut. But it's just the way it was.
I don't know. I've been known to freeze Rocky out for about a week, but we always seem to work it out eventually. And then the commitment that y'all showed to the grandparents. When Daddy had his neck surgery, all four of us were there. Barry had driven in, and it's 4:30 in the morning, and we're all meeting up at the hospital. And he says, "Well, golly, all y'all are here. What do you expect?"
It was like that too when I had my bypass surgery. Everybody was there.
Well, y'all taught us what was important, and not to say that one of us might not miss something coming up unavoidably, but y'all taught us that family was just that important, and then have a commitment to each other. And we just hope that filters down to our kids. Sometimes we wonder, but we try to show that to them too.
Well, we are very proud of all of our grandchildren too. We try. We don't want to show them any favoritism one over the other either. So.
Well, I know it's a little tough to see the blue hair and stuff like that sometimes, but Rocky and I try to pick our battles, and we don't quibble over the blue hair and the nose rings. It's other things that are more important than that. We try to address those things. So.
Well, you don't want ever for your children to stop like we did with y'all. You don't want the kids to stop talking to you or not want to even see you or something over something that you said or did. So you try to. There's some things that you can look over because they're not that important, really. So.
And I'm gonna say too that in the early years when our kids were little, a lot of times we'd come here for the weekend, and I know that after working all week, I was longing for a little free time. But what we would do is we'd come over here, and you had extra cooking and extra cleaning and extra chasing babies and all of that. And I think maybe at the time I didn't really realize how much that took. I'm seeing it a little bit more now because I have my own grandchild, and we try to fill in and help out when we can and try to give a little more stability. But I appreciate it more now than I did then.
Well, the difference was too, though, that I never worked out of the home. I was always a stay-at-home mom. So, yeah, I mean, but it's different with you. You had to go to work and all that, and then you had to come home and do your try to do housework and cook and all that. But for me, I was always here, so I had the whole day that I could do my stuff. I didn't have to come home at night and try to do everything. So it's kind of rough on these working moms like you and uh, so. But
But and name an incident that's important with you
uh,
when they came here.
You'll keep your turn.
do looking on this thing about when you and Rocky were gonna get married. Here, you and your daddy decide that y'all want to have the wedding reception here at home. Oh, I was so upset. I was afraid it was gonna pour down rain, or so. I said, "What are we gonna do with all the people if it starts pouring down rain and all this stuff?" I was scared to death of having a wedding reception here. Um, and then my brother and his at that time it was was ended up being his second wife, but they were just girlfriend boyfriend at the time. He came here and before you got married, and they expected to be able to share the same bedroom over here, and you came to your daddy and said, "Dad," he said, "you gonna let them sleep in the same bed over here?" We were always told that until you're married, you just don't do that. And so your daddy talked to Bubba, and he and Mamie went and spent the night somewhere else. But that was something too growing up now. Of course, I know the standards and everything have changed so much now. So that's another thing we have to adjust to. I know.
Well, it's not so much that the standards have changed, the standards are still there. But when you have kids that make other decisions, you have to decide. You address what you can, and the rest of it, we have to let it go. There's a lot of things that I don't agree with, but like you said, you still have to have the situation where you can still talk to them, and if you hound them about the things that you don't agree with, you got to pick your battles. And I've told Kathy, especially with Eddie, I said, there are times that I'm going to tell you things that you're not going to like to hear, and I've got to say it because I'm the mama. Now, what you do with it after that, I don't have a whole lot to say, but I've got to tell you. And I have done that. There's been an occasion recently where I felt like I had to put my foot down.
I know with Dad and I, though, we kind of back off now because the grandchildren are not our children. They're our grandchildren. So we have our opinions about things, but we kind of keep it to ourselves, and we have no influence over them, and we don't want to be an influence over them, really. It's not things that we always agree with, but we keep it to ourselves, and.
I think the way us kids feel is that it's sometimes difficult enough for us to address some of those things with our kids, and we have so little we have influence, but we have so little say over what they do because they have their own life. And so how we see you as grandparents is we just ask you to accept them and love them as best you can.
And we do love them. We love all of them. We think they're all precious. And we really do.
What was I like as a child?
There is one thing that bothers me till this day. I remember, and I didn't know this for till years later. The boys all shared one bedroom, and Debbie had her own room. And it was still when Barry was very young, and so I'd have to go in the room and actually put him to bed. And so I'd tell all the boys good night and all that, and I probably would. I'd probably give Barry a kiss on the forehead or something. And yet I'd pass Debbie's room and I never would open the door and tell her good night. And why? I mean, it just kills me now that I think about that it is not 'cause I don't know what it was. That I just, and sometimes I think you would get upset about that. But I wish that you had taken the initiative saying, good night, Mom. Then, I would have probably stuck my head in there too, but I don't know why. I guess by the time everybody was settled in bed, I was pretty tired. And like I said, I had to go put Barry in the room with the boys. So then as I'd walk out, I'd tell them all good night. And never dawned on me to open the door and tell you good night too, or walking down the hall, and that sometimes I think about that and it just breaks my heart.
Yeah, but I think you need to let go of that. And it's probably the same sensation I had when I'd come home from work and have to run through everything. Sometimes it included a karate class, so they had to be fed by 6:30. Well, fed by 6:20, out of the house, at karate class for 6:30, back home at 8 o'clock, bed, make sure the homework was done, get them all put to bed. And so by the time each child was put to bed, they were probably wanting a little moment with Mom, but I was like, I was done.
Right.
And so you telling me that story, it's not exactly the same thing, but I kind of understand that. You get to the end of the day and you get to the end of yourself, and that was it. And you probably even thought I was asleep by then, so I just let it go.
But you know how sometimes when you're sitting and you're thinking about things that went on with your kids and all that, and there are some times when you wish you had done something differently with them or something, but
yeah, but
you
those
can't
kids,
change it. You
those
can't change
kids, whatever they thought about it at the time, when they have their own kids, they understand. And that's like the old people would always say, you're going to understand this when you have your own kids. And we would hear that growing up, and we didn't understand it, but we do now. There's so many things that you kind of click into place when you have your own kids that you understand better.
Yeah.
Because really, when you're a little kid growing up, Mom and Dad are like superheroes. You think they can do everything. You think they're always supposed to be right. You think that they're capable of just anything you would expect of them, and that's not so. But when you're a kid, you don't know that.
Right.
And you don't know those things until you get older. And then when you're parents of your own kids, you realize how much your parents stretched to love you, to provide for you, to just keep your temper sometimes, because that's a challenge. And with 4 of us, I mean, the older I got, and even after I had kids, I'm like, good grief, with 4 different kids in one house, how do you get through that? I had 2, and they're both very different, and sometimes just dealing with only 2 of them was a challenge. So.
Yeah, but like Dad and I both said, we tried, we loved all 4 of you just so much, and so we just wanted y'all all 4 to feel the same. We didn't want to try not to have y'all feeling any, that one was.
Yeah, no, but to me that's almost unrealistic. I mean, it's really hard to be perfectly balanced.
It is.
With each of 4 kids that are different, because everybody needs something different at different times.
Right. Right.
I just wanted, and I don't know if I ever got a chance to tell you this, and I was going to at one point, but Michael would not be an Eagle Scout today if it wasn't for you. Because she was, you were the den mother for all three of them, one time or another, and there was no Girl Scout troop here till I was much older, so I got
Right.
drawn into the Cub Scout deal.
They had no Cub Scouts either for Larry. It was Gary and Barry that they started up Cub Scouts. But you helped out so much with them too, though. So that's how you realized what scouting was about too, because the kids would come to the house for their meetings every week, and we'd do little something as a fun thing, and you would help out so much with them. You'd want to do things, to.
And I remember, I don't remember Gary's Eagle Project too much, but I do remember Larry's with running all over Pierre
Oh,
Park,
yeah.
picking up all the antiquities and and took Mama with me. That was hilarious. She was, she would go with me to the old people and explain to them what I wanted, and we'd pick up the pictures, the old pictures and whatever, and bring them back and label them and everything. So,
And they knew they would get those things back, because a lot of them, they didn't want you to take them because they thought they might not get them back. And
but she helped me talk them into giving them to us, and I think we got everything back to the right place.
oh yeah, we did.
But when Michael was in first grade at St. Francis, Kathy's Girl Scout leader said, "Look, we need to form a Cub Scout pack here. This is where the kids go to school." And that was one of those experiences that was another learning experience. I didn't really know much about being a leader of other people. I was used to running my own show, but it was kind of a trial by fire thing where we would have committee meetings with the Girl Scout leader was one of the main people at the meeting, and she and this the Cub master would get at each end of the table and throw pot shots at each other, and I'm sitting there trying to keep control of the meeting, which at first I'd come home discouraged and I didn't quite know how to do, but gradually over time and just trying different things, kind of managed to rein them in a little bit. So as time went on, I kind of learned on a practical basis about leadership. Of course, a lot of my leadership was doing a lot of it myself. But Gary and Laura were involved in the pack. Rocky was, once Gary redid the Pinewood Derby track, he got Rocky hooked into it, so he became a leader too. So because and I saw that it was possible to make that pack go if our family was in it, and because I knew I could count on Gary and Laura for help, and even Rusty and Donna were in it and all that, and Rocky. So we kind of did it as a family, and really Cub Scouts helped us become a closer family because of that, because we go on Cub Scout outings and Kathy would go with us because it was a family thing. And so on through Boy Scouts and everything, we just stayed real close with it. And Rocky did, especially taking Michael to camp and all that. But for Michael's Eagle Court of Honor, I remember thinking none of that we wouldn't have been there if you hadn't been in Cub Scout leader with the boys. Because if you'd have just been one of the moms, if the boys would have been in Cub Scouts, you'd just been one of the moms, it probably wouldn't have made that big an impression on me. But because you had the meetings here at home and you did what it took to run the meetings and all of that, it gave me an example.
It was hard for me to step into that because I always saw myself. I always said that when they asked me to be a den mother, they were having a hard time getting enough mothers to volunteer, and I said, well, I don't mind helping out, but I can't be the one leading the whole thing, And I don't know how it turned out that's what happened, and I didn't ever see myself as one to lead everybody, but it kind of worked out. So, but then like I said, I had help from you too. So you kind of, you helped out a bit too. And then Gary was, by the time Barry got into it, he was, what do you call?
Weebelos.
He was working with them too. He was the Boy Scout that was at the meeting at our den meetings and all this too. At our things. And so I don't know. It's something I did that I didn't think I was capable of doing, but
Well, there's one more thing in addition to the garden and the house and cutting the grass and raking the leaves and doing all that kind of thing.
well, it wasn't so much that. It's just that I always felt like I wasn't one that would be able to put something together, and know exactly how to organize it and make it work and all this stuff. That was my problem. I had never done anything like that before, where I was the one that was responsible for what was going to take place and all this stuff. But then, I guess being a den mother for the Cub Scouts, it led me later on in years when they needed a religion teacher for Barry's group. I got pulled into that too, and I did it. But I didn't think I could handle that either. But kids would come here to the house, and we'd have a religion class. And I handled that too, but I didn't think that was something I could do either.
But see, that's another example of, I don't think very many people actually feel like they can do something just off the cuff like that. They think they need special training or they need to have a certain kind of personality, because I've run into a lot of people over the years that they'll say what you said. Well, I can't be the one in charge, but I don't mind helping. Well, somebody's got to lead the charge.
Yeah, that's it.
And but when you step out and you do things like that, you find strengths in yourself you didn't know you had. And I think that's what you did. And that was an example to me anyway of sometimes you just keep putting one foot in front of the other and maybe get some other people to help you with it. And it helps you become something that you didn't think you could do.
Yeah, I remember Debbie as when she was younger, she loved to play with paper dolls, and she loved her Barbie.
She called them chatty cats.
She loved her Barbie dolls, and yet the girls like Kelly and Kathy, they didn't care for dolls too much.
They did some.
But you...
Well, Kathy would want me, I'd come in from work and she'd want me to come play Barbie dolls with her, and I'd sit down on the floor and I'd end up going to sleep.
We helped your son build a bridge too with the Boy Scouts.
For his scouting, for his Eagle Scout project, yeah, it was... Pop went and helped with the bridge thing.
Mm-hmm.
But and then I didn't I read a prayer or something too at his Eagle Scout
Yeah,
thing?
you did. One thing that one thing that has been a strength in my life was your dedication to the Catholic faith. Because it was actually kind of funny though, thinking back on it now. Lent would come and you try to round us all up like a herd of cats to go to confession, and by the time we got to confession you were so aggravated with trying to get everybody there and to do what they were supposed to do that you were just kind of outdone.
Then by that time
you really needed confession.
I really needed to go to confession. Yeah.
But Daddy insisted on us going to church and everything, and he did too and all that, but I think you were pretty much the driving force behind all that. And
well, I kind of think the mother is the one, because I know there were times when your dad probably wouldn't have gone to Mass if I hadn't, because I know working like he did sometimes, he was really tired, but he'd get up and he'd go, and but I don't know. I was brought up like that, and I went through to Catholic school through the 8th grade and all that too, I guess, and had nuns. Nuns were my teachers, and But it's strange that you say that, because now sometimes I wonder, I think that I'm not as strong in my faith as I should be. You know, I think that there's other people that have, I don't know, just looks like they, well, like they do so many of the other things, like going to, the way of the cross and different, things other than the Sunday Mass. Mostly now, that's about what I do. Is I don't miss Mass on Sunday, but I really don't push myself for the other things going on now.
Yeah, but I think my opinion is that your faith is really a matter of what's between you and God, and the things that you do. If you choose to do things that exercise your faith, well, if that expresses your faith in God, then that's fine. If you can't do those things, or you're not inclined to that, you still have that personal, relationship with God. That's because in the end, that's all that's left. In the end, that's all that's left is you and God. If you lose everybody in your life, you still have God.
Well, I know right now Father's been talking about, well, he wants to reinstitute it, the Catholic Daughters of America. And way back when they first started it out over here, I did belong to the Catholic Daughters. But then it just kind of drifted away.
It's done that in a lot of communities.
And I probably gave it up before they all gave it up, but it just looks like it was just so hard to do that monthly meeting or something or another. I don't know. But Father is trying to bring it back now, but I don't have the tendency to want to join now. I don't know.
Well, Mom, you've lived so long and done so much, and I mean, you've got a track record of having worked so hard all your life with your family and everything that it would be asking a lot, to ask you to give that much more.
I'm just not one really that joins a lot of organizations and things. Like you said, I pushed myself with the Cub Scouts, and then I pushed myself with the religion thing, because I guess that was for you kids.
Mm-hmm.
But now for myself, I don't feel like to join all kinds of organizations and all this. I just don't have the desire to run here to this meeting and to that meeting and all over the place. So I just don't do it.
But I feel like that gave me the groundwork, because I've always relied on my faith in my life, but these days I really, really lean on that.
She has never fully been accepted in Pierreport. That's important to say that in here.
Mm-hmm.
She belonged to the Red Hats. She fell sick with her heart that time. Carrie Mobile told the organization twice they usually sent cards
And
to
visited.
everybody. She didn't get a
And
one
visited
card.
the
She
hospital.
dropped out.
Somebody would visit the hospital to see them too when they were in the hospital. And
Well, I think
had-
that organization's more of a popularity
So
thing.
it's a clique.
Yeah, it is.
Well,
So she
Carrie
dropped out. I
yeah.
told her drop out.
Carrie still belongs and all this, but that's another thing. I just didn't feel like after that, I just didn't have the heart to want to go back, because
No.
I didn't feel like I was important to any of them anyway, so I just quit going. I do enjoy the ceramic things, though. It's not a big group of us. Ella finally talked me into joining. But it just looks like everybody kind of, they're all different ages and all this. Not real young ones, but in fact, I'm the oldest one there.
Hmm.
But
Well, if it's something you enjoy.
it's just something it's getting away from the house one day a week, I guess. I don't know. So for now, I am. I don't know. It might come a time too when I just get tired of that too. So it's the way it goes. Sometimes you just get tired of doing the same thing all the time. But
I cooked supper the other night. This is kind of changing the subject a little bit, but Michael and I were talking, and he said, I said something about cooking, how I cook. I said, yeah. I said, I kind of cook like Granny. And Michael said, no, you pretty much cook like Granny.
really? Because I know when we first moved over here too, or when I first married your daddy, I had to almost learn to cook all over again. I didn't know how to cook rice. I didn't know how to fix grits. And, you know, and
And
that's
gumbo
what-
was an evolution.
Yeah.
You started
so-
out cooking gumbo the way you would a stew with a thick gravy, and then gradually over the years figured out about thinning it out a little bit. And we ate it the way it was the first time.
The
We didn't
last
care.
gumbo I fixed, Larry said that was the best gumbo I've ever made. I guess maybe I'm learning how to do it after all of these years.
Yeah, but I think gumbo comes out different every time
because
you do it.
you know, but I still cook a lot like Mama. You take like the roast we had today. That's the way my mom always used to cook it. You know, with the gravies and all this. And
Michael always reminded me so much of Uncle Barry. And actually, with him back home these days, he doesn't remind me so much of Barry. He's just Michael. But when he was growing up, he reminded me of Barry.
because at 9 years old, you kind of took over as a little mama, and remember. She had him in his high chair and was feeding him like she does Eddie now. And he'd just get the biggest kick out of going all over her face.
Yeah, what kid doesn't? You know, once they find out they can do that, then they usually do something. And boy, once you laugh, that's it. You're done because they're going to do it to you again.
But she used to feed him a lot and do it and change his diaper and all kinds of things, you know. I mean, she just really did a lot for him.